20-year-old Morgan Harrington went to a Metallica concert in Charlottesville, Virginia on October 17, 2009. She got separated from her friends and was never seen alive again.
In the months that followed, there were haunting clues, including a DNA link to another vicious attack. There was national news coverage, countless press conferences, and a massive search that ended about 3 months later with the discovery of Morgan's remains on a remote farm about 8 miles from where she disappeared.
This isn't a story about Morgan, though. This is a story about how great loss can be transformed into a powerful force for good. I'm Jesse Crossan.
I'm Courtney Stewart.
And this is Life After. Today, we're talking with Morgan's parents, Jill and Dan Harrington, who experienced the greatest loss that parents can have.
And I spent years covering this case and talking with you so many times, and it has stuck with me. It's had a huge impact on me over the years. So it's really good to see you again, and I really appreciate you both doing this.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for having us.
So I think we wanted to just maybe go back to the first moment when you first found out that something was wrong.
Mm-hmm. For me, the first moment was I came into our home after being at church, and Dan was sitting in his chair reading the paper, and he said, I got a call from the police at UVA, and they found Morgan's purse. And it was like the tectonic plates of your life shift. Because I said, well, if they have her purse, where's Morgan? She would have called us. A woman does not leave her purse. Something terrible has happened. And we went on from there.
So there was a 3-month investigation, no conclusion, no idea what had happened. What was that time like for you? I mean, how did you experience the not knowing and the fear and loss?
That was the worst time. Having a missing daughter, it sounds difficult to believe, but having a missing daughter is much harder than having a deceased daughter. Yeah. Because you simultaneously, you're on a pendulum of you don't want to give up on your beloved child, and yet you don't want to get your hopes up because likely this is not going to end up well. So to try and brace yourself and hope at the same time, we would not be the same people that we are if we had not recovered Morgan's body. It's a very primitive, perhaps, emotion to bring the body home and to do whatever memorializing and ritualizing gives meaning to what her life was. I'm so, so grateful that her body was found.
In those horrifying 3 months and what you were living through, what got you through? And maybe Dan, I'll start with you.
We during that period of time, you have to start grieving. And I think that I did not do very well. Jill, I think, was in a position where she was hopeful that a good outcome could come. For me, I was I was pretty paralyzed in terms of in some ways functioning. However, during that period of time, the thing that probably got us through was doing kind of the things that we're doing right now with you. It gave us a reason for trying to figure out maybe someone knows something. I've said this really from the beginning. When something bad happens, individuals grieve, and they grieve differently. And Jill and I grieve very differently. I was crying a lot. Jill didn't maybe cry once. However, at the same time, couples have to grieve. And I think that that's one of the things that we did well, in that we somehow supported each other and didn't go into a shell, And if you look back at other situations that have occurred around the country where someone's been missing and maybe they've been found, the divorce rate is really high. And I think that's the reason is that they don't know how to grieve together.
I am so interested to maybe just stay on that subject just for a minute. I know one of the things that was different, I was a reporter covering this case at the time, and from the very beginning, you two came out together and spoke publicly about this. And it seemed, you were sort of on the same page as far as that went. Was that something that you shared in common, the desire to speak publicly?
I mean, we are very close. We have a great relationship. And from the beginning, I said, we took one terrible hit, but there's going to be no collateral damage. We're not going to throw anybody under the bus. We're going to be okay. Our marriage is going to be okay. Alex is going to be okay. And we kept to that. And I mean, we were going hard and we were grief-stricken. I mean, we wanted to go and just get in the bed and pull the quilt over our heads. And every day when we got into bed, we would talk and I would say, give me the pinky swear. We got one more day. Tell me if you want to do tomorrow. If you want to pull the plug and just stay in the bed tomorrow, we'll do that. But you have tomorrow in you. And so we did it day by day.
I think in some ways, one of the things that worked so well for us was the second day when we came to the UVA police office. And of course, we had the state police and we had UVA police, Charlottesville police and county police all there. And as we were getting ready, we spent the whole day there. At the end, they said, you all need to go out the back because there are reporters out front. And Jill and I both said, we're not going out the back. We want to talk and maybe try to find Morgan. If Morgan's out there and she can hear us, then that will be what we need to do. And that truly was the beginning of us being able to, I think, do all the things that we did in terms of publicity and be public about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew who could advocate better for and plea for return of our daughter than we could do. That was not something we passed off to anyone else.
Yeah. And so despite having different styles of grieving or different ways of grieving, you had this shared purpose and communication with each other and a sense of being a team and prioritizing that, even in the midst of the tragedy and the loss.
And retrospectively, we can understand that. But, at the time, we were making a little piece of ground and standing on it before we knew it would hold us. But to move forward, we had to do that.
It's amazing. And it from the very beginning, it seems like you faced head on the things that everybody else was running from or that people were telling you to run from in publicity, in these conversations, in doing that. And as those 3 months progressed, do you feel like you grew in hope or did you lose hope or did you feel like you were deeper in the grieving process? Where were you the day that Morgan's body was found versus the day that she disappeared?
I mean, in a way, it was a shot of joy. They found her body and we can bring her home and no one can ever hurt her again. I mean, and it was crazy. We jumped in the car and drove over Afton Mountain, quickly, which wouldn't have made any difference. She had been dead for a long time. But we felt a really visceral need to be there.
Because I know in the book you talk about them telling you to go home and just, deal with this later and come back. And you insisted, you said, no, we're not going anywhere. We need to see her.
Yeah.
What do you feel like was the importance of that? Was this closure for you? Was this connection? What was the meaning of you being able to see her remains?
I think it is a visceral thing. Maybe it's a way to get into your brain that, we have actually seen this. We're both medical people and I'm an oncology nurse and I have strong feelings about death. And I also think that we have perhaps over-sanitized it in our society and culture and given over those rituals and access to strangers. It's a really intimate thing.
I wanted to ask you about that because you've been very public about this kind of interesting perspective on death. They're very different than many people. What is your history and how has that shaped your perspective on death and grieving?
Well, again, working in oncology and having seen a lot of death, I also work with a medical team in Zambia, Africa. And grew up overseas, so I've seen different cultural ways of processing a body. The help and the comfort that a family gets from washing the body. That's something we didn't have with Morgan. But did we want whatever was left, whatever remained of her, we wanted to have connection and touch and proximity with.
It's amazing.
When you did have her remains back and you knew that she had been found, were there things or I don't want to, I guess, rituals or things that you did to try to work through the grief in a way that was either together or individually?
It's so difficult, I think, to think back to that time and to know exactly what we did. We just worked together. I mean, for example, in our neighborhood was the man who owned the funeral home, and so he actually brought Morgan's body back, and he opened the door to his to the hearse and to let the spirit come out
back in front of our home.
Yeah, and if you go back to the time that Morgan's body was found, we had sort of a contentious relationship with the legal system, and we wanted to see Morgan's where this was, and we were told, if you do that, we are going to arrest you. And so, fortunately, we had some people who worked on the inside, and they basically took us to the airport, and they flew us through with a helicopter over the site so we could at least see it. But we didn't visit that place for another year and a half. And I think that was really something that was done poorly. And I think when you have that kind of a situation, I think actually seeing the place and being there, not touching anything, not doing anything with the crime scene would have made, I think, that a little better for us. Flying over was great. We were able to at least see the place, but again,
you could see there. I mean, it's such a big land.
I was there.
How in the world could they have found her? I do think she wanted to be found, because if the weather had been different, that farmer would not have been out checking fences. He would have bush hogged the field in the spring. She would have ended up in a hay bale. We would have never known, and we would have been consigned forever to be in that missing phase that was the most agonizing for us.
It sounds like you find the ability to have gratitude in an impossible situation. You find things that you're thankful for, things that you kind of connect to. Do you feel like that was something you shared, or do you feel like you both had kind of different grieving processes or different ways of perceiving it, and that influenced one another?
I think we grieve very differently. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm the crier and the pessimist, and from day one, I really thought, this is over with. Morgan's not going to be found. Jill held out hope, that maybe Morgan was taken by somebody. Maybe Morgan, like the police said, maybe she took off with a boyfriend or whatever. So for a while, Jill was more, you were more hopeful. But we grieve, I think, really differently.
And do you feel like that complemented one another in a way, like your hope kind of lifted up your pessimism and you kind of like tamped her down to reality? Or do you feel like there was a conflict between you as you had these very different styles of grieving?
I think that it was not conflictual. I think there was some discomfort because we usually are so close and on the same page. And, here is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And, the guy who has shored me up and helped me through any other hard spots was falling in the door crying. And I needed him to be my rock. And he was looking at me. I'm usually a pretty empathetic person. And it was like, what? You're never crying. But I felt if I did one time, I did the terrible, ugly cry once. And I thought if I ever let that out again, I'll never be able to stop. So I'm just not going to do it. So we had both chosen a different way. And it felt awkward to be not on the same page with this important thing. But I think we both extended understanding to each other and realized what was going on. It wasn't a big problem. It was just kind of, this is different.
Speaking about some of finding gratitude in maybe unexpected places, you told me once about a trip, one of the first, maybe the first trip that you took, a medical mission to Zambia, and something that happened there that is both heartbreaking, but also ended up giving you a profound message. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah. So I have never been angry in this process. I have never proceeded from hate. I think if we had, we would not be where we are if that was our motivation. I did want to stop Jesse Matthew because I didn't want anyone else to get killed. You know, it was motivated by protection. So that being said, I went to Africa, where I work with a medical team, and a mobile medical team. And on one of our second clinics, our team leader came to me and said, Jill, the 2 cars have left to transport patients back into town. We have this mother with this sick baby. Would you be with them on the trip into town? The only vehicle left is this bus. So I said, fine, I'll go. And there's a mother and a little baby. Baby was 10 months old. And her name was Gift. And the mother-in-law was there also. So they're the 4 women and the bus driver. And as we are driving to town, which is maybe 20 minutes from our clinic site, the baby became agonal. And, I was stimulating her on my lap to try and get her to keep breathing because she was apneic. And you could see her little fingers, the tips of her fingers, turn white. And she was moribund. I mean, we did get her to the hospital and she did take a couple of breaths there, but she died very shortly after within minutes of us bringing her there. And I was furious. I was so pissed off. What in the heck? I came to Africa to try and save lives, to assuage my grief of my daughter's life being taken. And instead, I've got them dying on my lap. What the hell, God? What are you doing? I was spitting nails almost until 48 hours later. I said, I got it. I understand. Who am I to be so angry that I lost my Gift, my Morgan, after having her for 20 years? That mother was 20 years old. She had her Gift, her baby, for 10 months. I was the lucky one.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that is such a moving story.
You said previously that you wanted to stop Jesse Matthews, but for that period, even after Morgan's body was found, you didn't yet know who was to blame. You didn't know what had happened. You didn't have answers. So it seemed to kind of fire this fuel in your belly for this cause. And what was that cause, and what did it drive you to do?
Yes, we started very organically. We started Help Save the Next Girl, which it came after a press release when I was saying, we had a composite, and I would say, this man, we're looking for him. If you know anything, please call the police. And I feel that he's a local person. And then law enforcement said, it wasn't, it's likely was a drifter.
Charlottesville's safe.
Charlottesville is so safe. And I said, you know what? it's too late for Morgan. She's dead. But we must save the next girl, because I said predators stay where they blend in, and you blend in at home. And I didn't want another murder. The police told me it was most likely we would find forensics that would help solve Morgan's murder from the next body. And logically, I understood that was likely to be how things transpired. But I was going to do everything I could to stop it until that point.
I remember that time where law enforcement was suggesting that it was somebody who had come through, and certainly as somebody who lives in Charlottesville, that would be you'd prefer that. You'd prefer that this able person came to town and then left. And you both were very adamant, and even at time, you would make that statement, and it conflicted with what law enforcement said, but ultimately, tragically, several years later, you were proved right with the death of another girl, Hannah Graham, but then the apprehension of the person who had taken Morgan's life as well. So with that arrest and knowing that he had been taken off the street, was there relief? And I'm curious to hear if you feel like there's been justice, if you feel like that helps with any concept of closure, if there is such a thing.
Justice is an abstraction. It is just that he can no longer hurt anyone else. But it doesn't, there are no winners. His family has lost him as much as we've lost our daughter. I don't think there's closure. I don't think parents ever get over the loss of a child, but you can get past it. And to get past it requires transformation. That you have to relinquish the life that you had. And in our humanness, we claw to hold on what we had, which can never be. I believe, we had our Morgan, who was a great blessing to us. And we can never have her again. But blessings still flow. We have been blessed abundantly as a direct result from Morgan's death. But you kind of want to keep tipping this out because you want what you had. And you have to get to a point where you create a new life. We had our little picture perfect life, and it was smashed. So all we had were these shards of a life that used to be. And you can take all those shards and assemble them again. And it's not the same picture. This time it's a mosaic, but it still can be beautiful. But you've got to put the pieces together and see the beauty in it and allow it, instead of insist that I want what I had, and then all you have are these shards.
Was there a moment, I guess I'd love to hear from each of you, where you started to have that sense, like a moment that you sort of recognized that things were never going to be what you had? You were going to have to make this mosaic. But are there any moments that stand out to you as kind of a time when you thought, this is feeling better?
I know for me, and Jill's already talked about Help Save the Next Girl, which I think was an important piece, for Jill to kind of move things. For me, the summer before Morgan was murdered, she worked as an intern at the new medical school that we have in Roanoke, and I was part of the medical school. And I would say before that, Morgan, if she had the chance to go out with her friends, she would go out. That summer, Morgan's maturity over like a 2 or 3 month period was amazing. And she spent literally every night at home. I call it the magical summer. And so when Morgan's body was found, one of the things that we did, because Morgan was going to be a teacher and educate people, we started a scholarship at the medical school, the Morgan Dana Harrington Memorial Scholarship. And Thus far, we've raised $500,000, and we've had, 12 or 13 medical students helped with their debt. One of the other things that came out of this for us, which just happened actually, was one of our friends put together a Docs for Morgan basketball game to raise funds for the medical school. And we don't raise a lot of funds, but it's the medical students versus the residents and the physicians at the hospital. And it is amazing. We have 2 groups of cheerleaders. We have a band from one of the high schools, and we have 300 or 400 people come to this game. And it's like a way for us to have honor Morgan and yet not be sad about it. It's a day that we can laugh and actually it's almost like a circus in some ways. And so, for both of us, I think we found ways for us to be able to move forward.
I think that pathway into joy is an interesting one, because I think that is very slow in arriving. I brought this to read to you because I love it, and I think it expresses well what we're talking about. I slept and dreamed that life was joy. I woke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service is joy. And I think through my work in Africa, through Help Save the Next Girl, through the scholarship at the medical school, you derive a great deal of satisfaction from not just accomplishing something, but helping other people. And I mean, we both are caregivers, and that has really meant a lot to both of us.
And in addition to poetry, you wrote prolifically, including writing the book, Murdered, Dead, and for Good.
Mm-hmm.
What role did writing play in your grieving process, your transformation process?
I journal a lot when I'm under stress. So when I'm in Africa, I journal pretty much every day. When Morgan was missing, our house was a flurry of Post-it notes, because I would write things down. Then I would be writing Post-it notes while in the bathtub at the end of the day, because that was a way of pulling bits of glass or splinters from the skin that if it wasn't still in me, I've put it on the paper and it doesn't cause pain anymore.
And one of the things that occurred almost immediately after Morgan went missing was somehow we had this firm out of Washington agree to work with us, Lubbock, and they were a group that usually deals with football players who have get in trouble, and they try to figure out how do you help them get out of trouble. But they offered their services free to us, and for 3 months, they had Jill blog every day, and we would post it. And many of your poems came out of that. Mm-hmm. And but I think your writing really helps you a great deal.
And why are people interested? And again, I think everyone has loss, and they're looking for something in the toolkit that seems to have worked for someone else. Well, the murder of a child is one of the most catastrophic losses. And so people were interested to kind of see how you got out of the abyss. And slowly, you can. And no one wants to be the poster child for murdered children. And when people are able to formulate some of their path, it's usually a long time afterward, because they can't put pen to paper then, or they're unwilling or unable to share. We had to share from the very beginning because we wanted people to search for Morgan. Mm-hmm. So that was was the one thing that we could do that might pull her back somehow into our lives.
And really, despite our different ways of grieving and me crying frequently, that is the thing that basically pulled us together. right from the beginning. I mean, we were together all the way through until today.
And tomorrow.
In your book, you repeat the sentiment along the lines of love and hope diminish fear and pain.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a story about how you've seen or how you've experienced that in this process?
Mm-hmm. I tell you, Dan just talked about the scholarship at the medical school, and I think it is just such elegant circularity there that as a direct result from injury to our family, murder, death, we are educating and returning healers that will go out into the community and save lives. And that neutralizes evil. We kind of turned it on its head.
That's incredible.
Are there takeaways that you want other people to hear from this interview or from your writing or from your lives as you're living them?
I think we, Jill has already said it, and I think you have to figure out when you have something bad happen, and not necessarily a murder, but we all have loss in our life, and you really don't get over it. You have to get past it because many things are with you the rest of your life. And I think the tools that we've figured out for ourselves, other people maybe can't do, but they have talents and tools that they have to figure out in their own lives, how to move beyond it.
I mean, without a doubt, we were not bad before, but I think that we are better, stronger people than we were before Morgan was killed. She forced us to grow and enhance ourselves. When I look at my life and the times that were the most difficult, I call it the point of snap. When you're at the point of snap, you can choose. You can snap, or you can give into it and stretch and grow a little bit. And that's what we tried to do with this situation, is grow instead of snap.
When even in the depths of your grief, you were showing up for other people. You were showing up for other families that experienced similar tragedies. Was that part of your process? Why was that role so important to you?
I think because once you are in that ugly club, you do want to help other people. Mm-hmm. Like Alexis Murphy's family, that they had a loss as deep as ours, and we just embraced each other. That because there are very few people, when people say, I know how you feel, not many people know how that felt, but those people do. And you would extend as much as you could. It was like Ed Smart with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Morgan went missing, maybe a week or two after that, I remembered Ed Smart and what he did for his daughter when she was missing, and part of that cult for the year. And I somehow got their home number, and I called and I spoke with one of his daughters, and I told the story, and she said, my dad's not here right now. He's down in Atlanta, but he'd want to talk with you. So let me give you his number. And Ed Smart flew up here, and that was when we had the community search for Morgan.
That's incredible. As a result of this process and the kind of good that you say has somehow come out of it, what are the things that you value now that you didn't value before, or you value in a different way?
That's an interesting one I've never considered. What do I value differently? For me, I think we value the same things, or I value things that I valued before. Family, home, sanctuary of our home, service, contributing to the community. I mean, we were just awash in a tsunami of kindness from our neighbors. My neighbors fed us for about a year. I had to finally tell them, I got it now. Thank you, ladies. And the Southern Lady Casserole Brigade is an amazing thing. And when you're the one making the casseroles, you don't think it's so big. I'm going to make a little extra and I'll take it over to next door. But when you are stumbling around, not knowing, how you can get out of bed, and you open your refrigerator and there's food already ready to go there, it's really helpful. And it's so kind. We received such an outpouring of love and compassion. It was hard not to get better after all of that, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You've said that everyone experiences some kind of loss. Obviously not the same loss as you, and maybe not the same loss as somebody else. What is your kind of core message or your central message to someone who's experiencing loss and not knowing how to go forward or not knowing how to get through it?
I think for anyone who has a loss, no matter what it is, grieving is important. So it's not that you want to just throw that away, because there's stages of grief that you have to go through. But at the same time, you have to start looking ahead and invest yourself into something that will you like, or that you feel will make things better for you. There's no recipe for it, I think, but you can't just wallow in self-pity all the time, because nothing will get done.
And be gentle with yourself, little by little, and allow others around you to help. And you go day by day. It's like the pinky swear at night. Can you handle tomorrow? Let's just plan on tomorrow. Break it down into the component parts. And at the beginning, I couldn't go to the grocery store. I would go in the grocery store, and you'd go down the aisle, and there would be some chips or something that were Morgan's favorite, and it was like, I've got to leave right now. It can't take this. I had some of those nice people at the grocery stores who knew me. They would say, "You just sit here, give me your list," and they would go and do it for me. People are kind.
Well, this was amazing to talk to you. I really appreciate you both coming. Is there anything else that you would like people to think about, or stories that we haven't asked you to share that you think are important?
Courtney, I think you know the story backwards and forwards. So,
well, I would encourage people. There's a lot of information online. You also, your book, "Murdered and Dead for Good," is that available online?
Through the website.
Through the website, Help Save the Next Girl.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, we'll make sure people can find website information. And I have been inspired by you and changed by your story. And I really appreciate you continuing to share it with people who maybe haven't had a chance to hear you speak yet.
So there's one story that happened in the courtroom that I would want to share with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is at the end of the trial, and you end up sitting separately. That here's the defendant and here's the non-defendant. And I had always, in the many courtrooms that we were in, because we went to the Fairfax trial, we went to many trials, and I would always notice Jesse Matthews' family leaving and kind of scurrying away. And I felt badly for them. And I thought, that this took us 5 years to get to a trial. 5 years later, I still have people, when I go to the grocery store, coming around with their cart and saying, "We're praying for you all. We're so sorry about your daughter." And I did not want his family to be pariahs in this community where they live. So at the end of the trial, many people in his family, he pled, and it was over. And they came over and shook hands in the aisle with me and Dan. And then his mother was standing at the very end. And I went over and I hugged her. And we both said, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. I know this is not easy for you either. Because I wanted her to know that I had no hatred toward her. And I also wanted the community at large to know that I directed no hatred towards them. So how could you direct hatred towards this family?
It's really amazing because your whole story is not just about resilience, but it's about expanding in love and expanding in connection and expanding in kindness. And I can't imagine a more inspiring story to come out of anything, no less the greatest loss that's imaginable. Thank you.
I don't know if you will want to include this in here or not, but the day after the riots in Charlottesville, I came with Jane and Trina Murphy and her good friend came. The four of us came, and we did a little media stuff, but we walked down here to where Heather Heyer was killed and chalked a heart and left flowers and ribbons. I mean, we have used little mama tools of flowers and ribbons to make a difference in our story, in Alexis Murphy's story. And we linked arms, black, white, black, white. And we told people, I said, my daughter was killed in this town by a black man. I have no hatred. Trina said, my niece was killed in this town by a white man. I have no hatred. So how can you? If there was a moral authority for hatred, for the contra race, we had it full blown, but we did not feel it or manifest it or direct it outward.
So living that example of showing love in the face of what you've endured and the loss you've experienced and the violence perpetrated on your family, that is an example that you are setting for not just this community, really, for the world at large to see that if you can go through the world with love, that other people should be able to do the same.
Yes. And I don't hate Jesse Matthew. I hate what he did. But if you respond with hatred, then you become the same thing that you are against. You become like that evil. Why would you do that? The only way you win a tug of war is putting down the rope. Otherwise, both sides lose.
Well, Dan, Jill, thank you for this. And thank you for the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do and for being kind of the person and the symbol of hope in the face of so many people who have none.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all for your interest and care for this story.